Happy Women's Month, everyone. My name is Stephanie Melendres, and I am the Program and Events Manager at HPGM. Thank you all for registering for today's session titled Discovering the Power of Networking, facilitated by Sasha Parsons. So I'm going to introduce Sasha to you all. So Sasha has over 20 years of experience creating unique and impactful events. She is the founder of her own event planning company, Sasha J Events. She specializes in initiatives focused on leadership development, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Most recently, she created the structure for the Marquette University's Women Innovation Network. There, she created the Women in STEM Summit, which was awarded the 2020 Inspiring Program in STEM by the Insight into Diversity magazine. And of course, she was also an advisor to the HPGM Marquette Student Chapter. So thank you, Sasha, for joining us today and for sharing your knowledge with us all. So yeah, I'll let Sasha begin today's session.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this session. I love talking about networking. It is one of my favorite topics to talk about because one, there's a lot of misconceptions and people don't understand how it works and how to do it. And it can make your life so much easier if you know how to do it effectively. And so I really am passionate about helping people find their potential and reach their dreams, and networking is really a big part of how you can make that happen for yourself. So I am going to try to share my PowerPoint. Is it showing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. So hopefully this will work gracefully. And here we go. So networking, I learned about it the hard way. When I graduated from college, I'm originally from Michigan, and I wanted to move to Atlanta and work in human resources. And so I thought, hey, no big deal. I worked in career services when I was an undergrad. I had a little bit of experience. I had my brand new degree. So I thought, I'm just going to move to Atlanta and find a job and get my career started. This will be easy. So when I got to Atlanta, I did all the things that I thought you were supposed to do when you were looking for a job. I sent out resumes, I went to job fairs, I signed up with employment agencies, and I just couldn't find anything in my field. Like, I ended up working at the mall, and I'm like, well, why did I go to school and graduate from college and I can't find a job? Like, that was the whole purpose. And I was so frustrated. So I just started telling everybody who would sit still long enough, like, hey, I just graduated. I want a career in human resources. I have this experience. You have any suggestions for me? And so I ended up getting my first job in HR because my cousin's cousin on the other side of the family's husband worked in HR. And I'm like, I've sent out countless resumes and that's how I get a job. And so that job was temporary. And how I ended up getting my first permanent position in human resources is because a friend was dating a guy whose cousin worked in HR. Again, nothing to do with everything I was trying to do to get a job, but just through people that I knew. So time goes on, I'm a recruiter, and I would go out and find applicants for jobs and go through countless resumes and take them to the hiring manager and say, here's some possibilities for what you're looking for. And they would say, oh, well, my friend's son, I think he's going to be a good fit for this job. And they wouldn't even read the resumes that I brought to them. So again, I saw through relationships, people were getting connected to hiring managers. Also, I noticed growing up, my father, he worked for Chevrolet for 35 years. And that doesn't happen as much as it used to. You know, in the past, a lot of times people would come out of college and end up retiring from that same job that they first got. Or they're at jobs for, you know, at least 15, 20, if not 30 plus years. But these days, more than 5 years is considered a long-term employee. So in the course of your career, you're likely to change employers several times. And then also there's the possibility of layoffs. I've been laid off personally twice in my professional life. Another thing, people think networking is just about corporate careers, but really it applies no matter what industry you work in, and also if you're an entrepreneur. So with entrepreneurship, a lot of people are going to tell you when you first start a business, you need word of mouth. But how do you get that word of mouth started? It's with networking. People need to know who you are and what you do and why they should patronize your business. So after living in Atlanta for many years, series of life events happened that I ended up relocating to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's a funny story, so if you haven't heard the story, you should ask me. But when I moved here, I literally knew 2 people. So I had to create a whole new network once I moved here. So you never know what might happen through the course of your life where you have to build a network or expand your network. So that's why networking is just so, so, so important. So I don't know who started this rumor, but a lot of people believe that it's not what you know, it's who you know. That is not true. It's who knows you. And so knowing people is one thing, but they have to know you. So like, for example, when I said earlier about my cousin's husband helping me get my first job, my cousin Carolyn only knew me as her little cousin. I had to make sure she knew me as a recent college graduate who was interested in human resources, who had this experience that was looking for a job in her field, and not just her baby cousin. Once she knew those things about me, then she was able to be in a position to help me. When I was a recruiter, a lot of times I would come into people who say they were looking for a job. And I would say, well, what kind of job are you looking for? And they're like, oh, well, I just need a job, any kind of job. That is the absolutely worst thing you can say, because that doesn't make any connections for that person to be able to help. But once my cousin knew human resources was my focus, then it could click in her head like, oh, wait a minute, my cousin's Leslie, her husband works in HR. He might know something. So you have to be able to connect those dots for people so they know how to support you. So what I encourage people to do is to know what your superpowers are. So this might sound kind of silly, but it's true. You have to keep in mind, what about you is different than everyone else who might look like you on paper. When you graduate, if you're an accountant, whatever field that you're in, there's a lot of other people who also graduated, who's also an accountant. What about you stands out that makes you different? That if an opportunity comes up, somebody needs to pick you for that opportunity. So knowing this is what can help you stand out from other people. And that's an important thing to understand. And a lot of times people have a hard time determining what their talents are. So for those people, I suggest that they ask the people around them. Because if you ask your friend, you know, what are the things that you're good about? They usually can rattle off a list with no problem. Like, oh, well, you're great at this. And if I have to make an Excel spreadsheet, I know to call you, and you're awesome at that. Or if you have a mentor, they can rattle these things off. But sometimes it's hard for people to see their own talents, but the people around them, they have no problem seeing them. They're obvious to them. So before you start networking, you really want to do some soul searching on what do you want people to know about you and what are you trying to do. And then once you have those things, then you can start working on your elevator speech. And you hear a lot about elevator speeches, but again, there's a lot of misconceptions about it. So that's why I wanted to talk about it a little bit more today. So can I get a volunteer to read something for me? You can just go ahead and unmute yourself if you're willing to be the brave volunteer.
I'll volunteer. Hi, Sasha.
Hi. Okay. So this is one of your typical elevator pitches. Can you read that?
Yeah. Hello, my name is Alex. I'm currently a sophomore at XYZ University, and I will be graduating in May 2021 with my Bachelor of Arts degree in Corporate Communication. As a student, I have had the chance to gain leadership and organizational skills through my involvement as the Vice President of the College of Communication Student Council. In addition, I have worked for 2 years as a server at the Annex, allowing me to gain valuable customer service experience. I am seeking an internship in the field of public relations for next summer. Can you share with me any opportunities within your organization that might fit with my skills and experience?
Okay. What's wrong with this? And anyone can jump in. Jesus, how did you feel reading that?
It doesn't show me what the essence of this individual is, maybe what the power that this person has. How is he different than maybe a junior from ABC college who will be graduating with the same with the same degree?
Exactly. And it's just a huge chunk of information. Like I fell asleep halfway in the middle. Like it was just a lot to throw on somebody all at once. And when you're throwing that much information on someone all at once, it can come off very salesy, very pushy. It's like, hi, I'm this and I do this and I'm that and I'm what? It's like, wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. And it's uncomfortable for the person saying it, and it's uncomfortable for the person listening to it. And that's what gives networking a bad name. So here's a different.
I would argue, and sorry, I don't mean to take us down a rat hole, but I would argue it's asking instead of telling the other person what this individual could give them. So if you hire me, I can, give you this instead of it being, can you give me something, right? I hope, maybe that sounds abstract, but I think there's something to be said about if you hire me, this is what you get.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. So here's a different approach. To start off like a regular human being and say, good afternoon. My name is Alex. How are you? Like you would start a conversation with a person. Just because you're talking to a recruiter at a job fair, they're still a person. So to relax and just not start it off as this aggressive, just speech that you rehearsed. Also, when we're back in person, handshakes are so important. So even though we can't really shake hands right now, and who knows when we can, I did still want to bring this up because it's a nonverbal way to really make a good first impression. If you do like this little really weak fingertip handshake, it comes off very unsure, unconfident, you know, like it just gives this vibe of like weakness, and you're probably not really sure of yourself or what you're doing. But if you, on the other hand, have this super strong, long, bone crushing handshake, then that's not a good first impression either, because it's like, wow, you know, that's a little overwhelming. But to just be firm and just 1 or 2 or 3 times just shake someone's hand, smile, have some eye contact, it already sets the stage of this is a person who's sure of themselves, and whatever they're about to say, I want to listen to it. So this starts off, you know, yes, I'm a student, I'm graduating, I'm looking for an internship. I understand that you might have one. Is that correct? So if when you start off like this, one, you're showing that you've done some research about this company, that this isn't your canned speech that you're planning on saying to every single person you come across at this job fair. This is something you're interested in, this particular organization for a particular reason, and that's why you walked over here. Your elevator speech shouldn't come off like a pickup line. Like, this is the thing I say to everybody I walk across. I say blah, 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 blah. It makes that connection with that particular person in that particular organization. Also, it gives a chance for the other person to respond and say, why, yes, we are looking for that. And then not just say they're vice president of student council and they this, that, and other, but name some accomplishments or some achievements that shows why they're a good person for this role. A lot of times with resumes and LinkedIn profiles, people just put like a job description. I worked at this company and I did these things. It should really be a more of a list of achievements of, I worked at this company and I was able to increase the number of followers on social media by this amount. I won an Employee of the Month award. I became the person that was the go-to person to train new employees. You accomplished something. Just because you had a job doesn't necessarily say you were good at that job. What is the proof that you have that you were good at this job and you could come into another role and be good there as well? Now, keep in mind, this is an elevator pitch for like a job fair or a very professional type of situation. You want to have another version of this that's just more casual for like social events when you come across someone that might have an opportunity for you, or you're just talking to friends and family. And then another missing part a lot of people have is closing the deal out. Like once they say, okay, yes, make sure you know what you should be doing next to follow up. Do you need to apply online? Do you need to, you contact them on LinkedIn? Should you email them in about a month or so? Like, what are the next steps? And then also make sure they have a way to continue the conversation with you. When we are in person again, have a business card. So even if you're job searching and you're not working for a particular company, you can just have a networking business card that has your name and your email and your LinkedIn information, or just some basic information. Another mistake I see a lot with networking is the people who just hand out cards that any and everybody, and you're standing there with this card like, who was that? Like, what do they do? Like, why am I supposed to use this? Like, what is it for? Don't give someone a business card unless you have a conversation with them and you've made that connection with them. Again, you want them to know you and know why they should reach out to you. So one of my favorite quotes from Maya Angelou is, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So the key to networking is making people feel a connection with you. So they want to know more about you. So they want to be helpful to you. And they are expecting you to be helpful to them in return. So I am going to pause right there. Does anybody have any questions so far? It might be hard to see, like, how does that work in a virtual world? Like, how are you supposed to make people feel connected to you in a virtual world? But it is possible. So when I was at Marquette, Denise Thomas was one of my favorite people to bring in to talk about networking. She has some great information. And so I shall attempt to play a clip from a video that she has on YouTube. So let's see if this works.
So in that first interaction, when I'm networking and developing that relationship, what should I be focused on?
The first thing that you should be focusing on is, how do I create a connection? And I keep using that word because it's so important, because even when you think about the relationships that you're in and how they cultivated, it's because there was a common denominator, whether it was a core value, principles, interests, hobbies that were similar. There was some type of foundation that you and that individual shared that really helped cultivate that relationship. So when you are starting to engage with an individual, think about, even as from an aesthetic standpoint, if there's something like they're wearing a pin that represents the college they graduated from, if there's a college that you've applied for, you have a relationship, or, hey, my dad went to that school, just find ways that you can first introduce a connection by a common denominator that you can see. And even if you can't, or you don't see anything in terms of that sense, there's always things that are going on within our culture, pop culture, current events, hot items, hot topics. Use that as something that you can initiate that connection. Because again, the part of networking that is critical is first establishing a connection so that people want to continue to engage with you.
So I really encourage you to watch the rest of that video, and I will put the link to it in the chat. But making that connection is just a really key thing. So I want to talk about how you can do that virtually. So one thing you want to do whenever you're networking virtually is make sure you have a clear background that's not distracting. You don't want people like trying to read the stuff behind you and they're not really listening to what you are saying and that sort of thing. You want to have some good lighting so they can see you. You want to be centered in your screen. Those are all the same things that you're accomplishing with that handshake when you're in person, is your setup around you is doing virtually. Also, you want to make sure you dress appropriately, at least from the waist up when you're virtual, because again, it's all about that first impression and the nonverbal things that you're communicating. Even though it's virtual, you still should take it seriously, especially if it's a professional networking situation. And have the same energy you would use in person. Make sure you're speaking clearly and with confidence, so you're giving that impression that you know what you're talking about. You know, if you're talking, you know, real slow and quiet and I think, and it sounds like you don't even believe what you're saying. So you're definitely not gonna portray that to the person that you're listening to. So in Zoom, since that's a common format for people, one of the first things I do when I go to a networking event that's on Zoom is look at the participants and see if I know anyone. If it's enabled, you should be able to chat directly to that person and maybe say, you know, hello, good to see you at this event. So like Denise was saying about making that connection, you already have one connection. You were both interested in this topic. Also, make sure your name is showing clearly, because sometimes depending on how you connect to Zoom, it might show up as like the first part of your email and it's not clearly your name listed out. So if you hover over here, it's usually an option to rename yourself and make your name clear. Also, I would look at the chat. A lot of times you can save the chat. So there might be some interesting information in the chat, some links somebody shared in the chat, different things like that that you might want to save for later. And you might use that as the starting point to reach out to someone afterwards on LinkedIn or something like, hey, you know, I really like that article that you put in the chat. I was at this event with you. You know, I would love to, you know, talk more about that or something like to that effect. And so you're starting a conversation from a point of a common denominator. So your network is a lot broader than you think. So a couple people mentioned when I asked, why did you come to this particular workshop and what you were hoping to learn? And it was about, a couple people said about making their network broader or expanding their network. So it's good to start with your family. And like I said, making sure your family knows you not just as a relative, but as a professional that's looking to accomplish this thing. I have a cousin who's an HR director, and I didn't even realize she also worked in HR for like years and years until we were just chatting one day. And it's like, oh, wow, we've been in the same field all this time, and I didn't even realize it because I didn't think of her as another HR professional. I thought of her as cousin Angie. Then as friends and mentors, they can be great resources of information. Old classmates, educators, alumni from your school. You already have a common denominator if you both went to the same school. Former and current coworkers. So even if it's not a position in your field of choice, they may have connections to things in your field of choice, because for each of these circles, they have their own circle of family and friends and classmates and neighbors and organizations. Joining professional organizations like HPGM is a good way to expand your network, because it's going to bring a lot of people into contact that maybe you wouldn't have ordinarily met. Community service work that you do or you're interested in is another way you're expanding your network. So building your LinkedIn profile is something I highly, highly, highly recommend, because these days it's one of the best ways to network, because we can't meet in person and we spend a lot of our time behind these face masks, and you can't have those same in-person conversations you would have been able to have before. So do I have a volunteer to poke at your LinkedIn profile? And if so, just put your LinkedIn link in the chat. Okay, so everybody can see my screen?
Yes, well, I can.
So the first most important thing I would check on LinkedIn to make sure that you have a unique URL. So see how her URL is just her name with dashes. Your automatic profile is going to have a lot of like weird numbers and letters and that sort of thing in it. So it makes it hard to share. But if you have a unique URL, then you can simply copy this and put it in a Zoom chat or put it on your resume or something to that effect. And you don't have to worry about all those extra letters and numbers and that sort of thing. You want a nice, clear, professional profile picture, which she has. You also want to add a banner that says something about who you are and what you do. So, Evelyn, what kind of career would you say you have? What do you do?
So right now I work for HPGM, of course, and the bulk of my work, I started as an intern. I was an intern for the majority of last year and then joined the team as a staff member a couple months ago. During my internship, a lot of the work I did was on social media. That is what I do now. I am also taking on some student programming efforts, but a big bulk of it is all online and social media.
So I asked you that on purpose because this is a good picture for you because you have a phone, you have a keyboard. I already got a digital marketing vibe or something about engagement in computers and social media since you have the phone and the keyboard. So you want something in your banner that gives somebody a clue before they even read any of the words that this is what I do and this is a clue to those superpowers we were talking about. Also, you want your headline to, again, give a little bit more information. Now, I would change this a little because it doesn't necessarily have to be your job title, but someone might not necessarily know what a member engagement coordinator does. So if it was more about, you know, digital social media marketing, you know, specialist, guru, whatever you want to put there, it makes it a little more obvious. Also, if you're on a phone, there's a feature where you can record your name. So then a little speaker comes up next to your name that tells how to pronounce your name. So if you have a name that a lot of people struggle with, that might be something that you would be interested in adding, because that'll make people feel more comfortable with contacting you. Because if they're feeling a little intimidated, like, oh, I don't want to mess up their name, then they have that there to teach them how to say your name. You also want to try to get to over 500 connections. That's like the secret number of trying to get that many connections, because that is going to help with how often your name shows up in feeds, how really valuable your presence is on LinkedIn. So people are actually seeing what you post. So you really want to try to get this number up to over 500. And as I showed with that circle graph, that's super easy to do because you have so many potential people in your network that you're probably not even thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
You're about, this is good. Because you're saying like what skills you have, why you're a good fit for whatever opportunity that you're interested in. Your superpowers needs to be there. Your activity, you want to make sure you have some clear, consistent and relevant content. Because if you click here and you go to posts, this should be very telling of who you are as a person. What kind of things that you're sharing, that you're posting about, that you saw and then you want to share your opinion on. So you see some women empowerment stuff, you see some things about voting, You you see the HPGM virtual gala, but
Stephanie.
notice that her last post was 3 months ago. You want to try to post at least once a week to really be consistent with your posting. And then see, like this one was 4 months ago. And especially if you're saying that you are an expert in digital media marketing and that sort of thing, for example, then your profile should say that. It should show that, like, well, you don't seem to be doing that. You want it to build on whatever it is you're saying. Like for me, empowerment, inclusion, diversity are all important things to me. But if none of my posts were about any of those things, then it's giving a conflicting message about what is important to me. And then another part of profiles that people don't use a lot, and I see Evelyn doesn't have, is to do recommendations. So for example, if you apply for a position, you and another person, you both applied for a position, you pretty much look the same on paper. And that employer contacts you and says, well, do you have some references? And you give them the contact information for your references. And then they reach out to your references and ask them some questions about you. And then they wait for those responses from your references. Meanwhile, the other person who has a very similar resume, they can click the link at the top of their resume that takes them to their LinkedIn profile and scroll to the bottom, and their references and recommendations are already just sitting there, which sounds easier. Now that other person has a little bit of advantage over you because they already got a chance to see what your references would say about you by just scrolling down, and they didn't have to go through all those extra steps. So you see there's a little pencil here where you can ask people for recommendations. The key is, what are all the little things that you can do to make you stand out from the next person? So is that clear? Anybody have any questions? So going back to the presentation, like I said, your picture, your banner, having a unique URL, your headline, your about, connect with people, put your experience, like I said, as accomplishments, not just a job description. And one thing I forgot to mention is following different companies, because you can see who works for companies that you might be interested in. Let's say you're interested in Northwestern Mutual. You can go to Northwestern Mutual's page, and it also already shows you how many people you're connected with that work at Northwestern Mutual. So those might be people you want to reach out to say, hey, you know, I'm interested in a position there. Do you know anything about this position or anything like that? Informational interviews. How many people are familiar with informational interviews? You can do the little reaction button if you've heard of an informational interview. I see one hand, or is that a question, Evelyn?
Oh, no, I've done informational interviews through school, Alverno.
Okay.
Alverno.
Anyone else do informational interviews? Now, this is an important thing for people at all different stages of your career, because it gives you a chance to get some information that you wouldn't find out just by looking online. To ask people, you know, some more questions about their experience, their journey, what's important in the field where they work. And I will put a link in the chat to some sample scripting of what you could say if you want to do an informational interview, and also some questions that you can ask, because we don't have time to go into it in detail like we did with the elevator speech. But like I said, no matter where you are in your career journey, informational interviews can be very helpful to get some of that insider information that you just can't find online. So all of that was about getting people to know you. And I realized that, you know, we're far in, and I'm just on step 2, but that's a very, very key part. Step 2 is about the like, getting people to like who you are. Now, some people in your network, that's already easy because hopefully your family and your friends, they already like you. But as you're making new contacts and you're expanding your network, the key to building that relationship is about being helpful. Like we mentioned earlier, it's not just all about you and what you want from them, but also what you can do to them, do for them. You know, is there any connections you can help make for them? Is there anybody you can introduce them to? I walked into a human resources office, and I was just looking for a part-time job in retail to kind of supplement my income. And I was going to work for a Sears. I was applying for a job at Sears, and I was just going to work in the mall to kind of supplement my income. And when I walked into the HR office, it was just packed, and there was all these people in there. And the lady who was working in there was by herself, and she was just going kind of crazy. Her phone was ringing. And so I just started answering people's questions. And like some guy, he was in there and he just needed to change his tax exemptions or whatever. And it was a wall full of forms. And I'm like, oh, you just need to fill out this form. And you need to, and I just started helping people because since I worked in HR, I knew some answers to like basic questions that anybody walking into an HR office would probably want to know. And so when things settled down and the phone started ringing, she was like, well, thank you so much. Who are you? Like, oh, I just saw you needed some help. So I was just helping out. I'm actually here to apply for a part-time job. And that ended up, she referred me for an HR job, which led to, I ended up getting a management position as a training manager because she was just so happy I helped her that she just wanted to help me. And it ended up with me becoming a manager for the Sears call center in their training department. Also, once you make these connections with people, you want to stay in touch with them and reach out periodically, because you don't want to be that person that's only reaching out when you want something, when you need a job, when you are looking for an introduction, when you want this, when you want that. You know, reach out to people and just say, you know, how are you doing? Or when you see that they got a new job, how's it going? How do you like your new job? You know, congratulations. Those sorts of things, to just stay in contact and reconnect with people, but reconnect with purpose. Like, don't just randomly say, yeah, hey, so what you doing? You know, make it purposeful. Like, oh, hi, you know, I haven't talked to you in a while, but, you know, I really would like to catch up and talk to you about this, or I see you're doing that, or that sort of thing, to really be intentional about your connections. So with the people knowing you and liking you, the next step is they start building that trust. Once you've shown that you can do the things that you said you could do, you do follow up, you do, if they make recommendations for you, like, oh, you should reach out to this person and that person, and then they come back to you and you say, oh yeah, I talked to the person you suggested I talked to, we had a really great conversation, and this happened. The worst thing is, a lot of times people will come to me for advice and I say, oh, well, you should try this, apply for this, do that. And then the next time I talk to them, they've done absolutely none of the things that I told them to do. And it's like, well, Okay, like why are you asking for advice if you're not gonna do any of things? And I may have talked them up to somebody that, oh yeah, you should talk to this person, they would be perfect for your job, and then that person never applied for the job. Then, you know, it makes me look kind of bad because they're like, well, what happened to this super great person that never applied? So you want to follow through so you can build that trust. And some evidence that you've done that is that person that you reached out to, and you got it, let's say you got an interview, and then that interview results in a job offer. It's because during that interview, you've built that trust that I didn't just write that stuff on my resume. I'm not just got all these accolades from somebody else. I'm really that person that you were hoping that I would be. And so that shows that you've made that connection and built that trust with them. So really, it all boils down to the key to effective networking is getting people to know you, to like you, and trust you. And that works the same whether you're talking about your professional life or if you're talking about a business you're building as an entrepreneur. So if you have any questions, because like I said, this is a lot of information to cover. It's a lot of different directions this to go in. And depending on your experience, where you are in your career, what you're trying to do next, it might be slightly different for you. So if you want to talk one-on-one, I'm open. Anybody can connect with me. Let me know that you came to this workshop and I'll be happy to help. So does anybody want to share anything they may have learned, something they're going to try to do differently because of some of the things that we talked about today? And you can either unmute or put it in the chat.
I'll go. I think I've been very old school in my way of networking. So a lot of in-person, a lot of just having conversations. And while we will go back to a post-pandemic world, there will be a lot of stuff that remains from this last year. And so like making sure that the LinkedIn profile, I'm not big on social media, so making sure that I'm going there and having activity so that it doesn't look like a dormant account. I thought that was very insightful.
Good. I heard someone say work on their elevator speech. So I am putting that handout in the chat. Anybody else want to share something that they learned or something they want to try to do differently? Stephanie, I'm going to pick on you. Did you pick up on anything?
I think where I'm at in my career is definitely staying in touch and reconnecting with those networks that I've made as a student, in my previous job. And for example, you know, I was able to like reconnect with you, with the facilitators that, all the facilitators for Conexiones Week. So I think reconnecting is important. I feel like sometimes we're scared or we're shy to reach out. We might think that, oh, they're very busy, but you know, again, being persistent and, you know, in the best way possible and reconnecting, I think is important, especially as someone who, you know, I have less than 5 years of experience in the workforce. You never know where the opportunities might be. So definitely staying in touch with people that have inspired you, who have been mentors to you.
Right. And you want to keep those connections warm because like I was implying earlier, you never know when you might need those people. So you want to stay in contact, even if it's just like once a month or every couple months or couple times a year, to just say, well, I would do at least 4 times a year, to just reach out and see how they're doing, or, you know, comment on something that they put on their profile if they're on LinkedIn or something like that, just so you can keep that connection warm. So if you ever do have to reach out to them for something, it's not like, well, wait a minute, who? And you're starting all the way back over to, you got to get them to know you again. And now you got to get them to like you again. And now you got to get them to trust you again. Like, keep that relationship current.
Right. Like what I've done is like, I have like at least 5 people that I know that I need to like reconnect with constantly. But yeah, like you said, just reaching out, saying happy birthday, texting them if you have their, number. So yeah, that's what works for me.
Exactly. And, I'm not a big social media person either, as far as like Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all those different things. But I have been making a conscious effort to be more consistent on LinkedIn, because that's different than other forms of social media, because that's about your professional network. It helps me stay current in my field and know the things that are going on, to stay current with the people in my professional network that I may need to reach out to for one reason or another.